women's rights, responsibilities, and achievements throughout the 1920s and 1980s. With world wars, movements of all kinds, it is important for us to recognize this huge change, especially when it involves rights and responsibilities and women.
Women's opportunities and the stereotypes and the biases that have existed in our country and honestly in all of humankind about what women are capable of doing and what women should be doing. The roles that women have been expected to play versus the roles that they are actually capable and competent to fulfill.
The first woman for the rights category is Nannie Helen Burroughs, who is a rape/suffrage activist in the 1920s and 1980s. She fought for education, civil rights, suffrage movements, and owning a bank, which she successfully did, being the first colored woman of the time to run a bank. She also started a school to help women get proper educations and get job training for them to be part of our society and workforce, which plays a major role in rights and responsibilities.
I would say the biggest fairness that I saw was the responsibilities that women had to take in probably the 80s when women started working more and men were working. The men were the breadwinners before, but the women started being the breadwinners too, and they were still expected to be the homemaker at home with the kids, with the house. They still had all the responsibilities they had before, but now they have the responsibility to also go to work full-time outside the home. And the nice thing that I see now is that it's shifted, and so now I see women and men both working, but now it's 50-50 at home. And so I would say the responsibilities of women was very unfair in that growing period, but now we're getting back to being equals.
Okay. Rosie the Riveter, as many of you might know her for her famous poster. The poster says we can do it all. It shows people that we can still work and manage the homes at the same time.
I think one of the biggest achievements is that women fought for the right to vote, and that just makes us more equal, as we should be. And there's still a long way to go, not just with voting, but equality. But I think that the women's right to vote was huge, and most people, those women before us, did a lot of work, so we can't take that for granted.
Janet Gaynor was born on October 6, 1906 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She was a great actress, fulfilling many roles. Her biggest achievement was being the first woman to win an Oscar for her movie Seventh Heaven at 22 years old in 1929. As she succeeded, she then gained a star on the Hollywood Boulevard. She then passed away on September 14, 1984 in Desert Hospital, California.
So back in the early days, it was like women couldn't vote, which was really bad. And then also, you never got job opportunities you only had nursing or housewives. You couldn't be, like a head of a CEO or whatever. You didn't get paid very much. And the men got paid 10 times more than the women did.
Who was a major factor for women's rights was Susan B. Anthony. She fought not only for anti-slavery laws, but fair wages among women, voting rights, and more. She traveled the country doing this, meeting with famous people for these rights, and she was very successful. But that success did not come along until later in the 1920s through 1980s, where the women started being a major factor in the workforce because of the world wars.
Between the 1920s and the 1980s, women made huge strides forward in all areas, but I think one of the really interesting changes is they have increasingly been integrated into the workforce in the United States, at least, in all jobs, well, not all, not president yet, but lots and lots of powerful jobs, and just there's so many doors open to young women today that were not open even to grandparents and great-grandparents. And I think along with that too, we've really seen a lot of changes even in men, and how men are now taking on house, like caring for the house and children and things like that. And so it's become a lot more equal, just even within a lot of marriages and things like that. So I think that's huge, and that is on the backs of the women during World War One, World War II, and then the women's movement of the 1970s.
Jenny McGill is known for being a working mom. She worked at a bridal store. She showed that a woman can work and still come home and take care of their families and their homes.
I read about the first female Supreme Court justice for the U.S. and Sandra Day O'Connor that happened in the 1980s.
Florence Ellenwood Allen was born on March 23, 1984 in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was a woman full of smarts and achievements. She received her bachelor's and master's degree in political science and constitutional law at the Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Her biggest achievement was being the first woman elected to the highest court out of any state on November 7, 1922. She then died September 12, 1966.
Until RBG was around, you couldn't have a checking account unless your dad's name or your husband's name was also on your checking account.
Women for Rights was Zika Lasala, who not only fought for rights for women, like voting, citizenship, and more, but also fought for rights for Indigenous people, so they could be able to vote, have a citizenship, and have a say in the society. She did this by joining a bunch of movements, by conveying everything through her writing, which was published but banned right after. But enough people saw it and saw these movements and started to make that change. So Zika Lasala was a major factor in the gaining of rights for women and Indigenous people.
I believe that women throughout history, not just the 20s through 80s, have always been given the unfair responsibility of not only taking care of the children, but also having to work, either in the home or outside of work, and having almost triple the duties that anybody else has. It is very mentally challenging to do, and very tiring, and we go through a lot.
Betty White, as many of you may know her from her hit show, The Golden Girls. She was also famous for being the first woman to have her own hit talk show.
Probably one female achievement that has stuck out to me the most was in the 80s. In 1983, I was a young woman, or young girl in school, and I specifically remember the first woman to go up in space. Because when I was in high school, I wanted to be a scientist. And I remember Sally Ride, that name just continued to come up in the 80s. And that was a time of my life when I was pretty impressionable. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, a second woman that kind of stuck out in my head was Krista McCullough. She was the first teacher, female, to go up in space. And so that whole level of that tiered leadership and that tiered responsibility, women weren't really portrayed in that science and that knowledge base world much, because it was always actresses and maybe homemakers. That's more the role that they played, and that's what most women were known for. And so for me, that was the biggest aha of, wow, there were other opportunities that could happen in a woman's life outside of doing those traditional homemaker or like showgirl or the paparazzi type of image that had been present. So those were my influential people from the 80s.
Sally Ride was born on May 26, 1951 in Encino, California. She answered a newspaper ad left by NASA and ended up being one of 5 women selected for NASA's class of 78. She then trained, with her biggest achievement being the first woman to go in space and the youngest American on June 18, 1983 in the Challenger STS-7. She then passed away on July 23, 2012.
Women have had such an important role in our government with gaining rights and responsibilities for everyone. We must remember that when it comes to an issue, we can fight for our rights and responsibilities just like how women have. That is why it's vitally important for us to remember how we came today.